Hello and welcome to the FPL Scope podcast. I am one of your hosts, Matthias, and with me today I have Kevin, as always, I should say. He's still back in Sweden and enjoying his time back with his family, back with his old friends as well. But Kevin, you are pretty happy in Sweden, but you're not that happy with James Maddison because he's been a thorn in our sides the last few game weeks. So are you looking forward to selling him now, or are you going to keep him?
Yeah, I think I've been left with no choice. I think it's one of those tricky situations where you have a gut feeling, you know that if he had sold him, he would have scored, and if he kept him, and all this type of stuff. But unfortunately, it just hasn't worked out for them, and I think Leicester are in real trouble. I think the sort of considerations that they have for replacement manager is terrible. I think
They got
just
Dean Smith
everything.
today. That's the
Yeah,
latest
Yeah,
interim.
exactly. Like, I don't think Dean Smith offers much, and John Terry, what's he meant to really do? We've seen Dean Smith do some really good things in the Premier League, but I just think that they're in such crisis mode that I don't think it's going to work out. I think James Madison, just generally speaking, has been kind of poor. I think Leicester as a team has been poor. It's just the right time to call quits. Martinelli has been firing on all cylinders and is several millions cheaper in that regard. So I think it's a simple move. Of course, you can then argue that Arsenal don't have the best matches going forward, but you got to back the form, I guess, and or consider making a move for Salah again, a guy who's missed penalties in the last couple of games, but it's time to move on. And I think it's time to get ready for the double game weeks and just ship Madison. Sadly, like I think he's going to be in the Premier League next year. Even if Leicester stay up, he's going to be leaving the club. There's
Yeah.
no way he's going to stay there another season. So I think it's time to move on.
So we're moving on Madison, and like you said, he might be moving on this summer as well, most likely. But where would you like to see him go personally if you could choose a club? Obviously, you can't choose Everton. He's not going to go to Everton. So sorry to burst your
I
bubble.
think no, 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 of course not. There's two clubs that I think I don't want to see him at either, but I think make the most sense.
Hmm.
One of those clubs is Spurs. I think he's exactly what they need.
Yeah.
He was sort of who they've been gunning for several. It's been like 2 seasons of them trying to get him and tie him down. I think he'd be an excellent choice. The Ericsson sort of dream move, and they sort of, um, I guess, the sort of glamorized move that everyone was sort of hoping for didn't happen and didn't materialize. I'm kind of happy for his sake because Spurs are also a shit show. No offense to any Spurs fans, but I think Spurs makes a lot of sense. They need someone who can facilitate the ball. They need someone who can do set pieces. Like Harry Kane can't take free kicks. He can take pens very well, but in terms of corners and stuff like that, I think he'd just add so much more. Son gets a few assists here and there, but Madison, being the sort of
It's a clear upgrade.
trickerista of, yeah, 100%. I think he'd be really good there. I also think he'd do really well at Man United, which I don't
Yeah.
want him to go to, but considering the fact that they already have Bruno Fernandes, who has main character syndrome, but Fernandes has sort of shown that he can play anywhere
Yeah.
and shine. So
Exactly.
if they bring in Madison, that's yet another option for them to play pretty much every attacking role because Madison has shown he can play left wing, he can play right wing, he can play cam, he can play CM, and to have such a utility player, and if they really want to go for the win or get a real version of Tadic, I think he'd be excellent at Man United as well.
Fair
City
enough.
obviously have too many good players.
Yeah.
Chelsea have too many players
Yeah.
to
They don't need
add.
another guy behind the striker. That's
Yeah, and I think what other clubs are there? I mean, he'd
Newcastle is the
obviously,
one that's been mentioned a lot.
yeah, and I think he'd do great there. But again, I don't know if Newcastle aren't. They're building something there. Don't get me wrong, and I think they're going to be a really good club going forward. It's just a question of whether he wants to join somewhere where it's still a work in progress, or he wants to go somewhere where you're immediately a contender basically for some of the big trophies. I mean, obviously Spurs isn't that, but Spurs are a little bit more aligned with being there or being thereabouts because they've done well throughout the years. They just
They've been
sadly not.
Yeah, they've been a Champions League squad the last like 5-7 years now. So I think that's what you want to see from Madison as well, to
Yeah,
see him play in the Champions League. We just watched City just now, and that's where the big bucks are made. Like that's where legends are
100%.
made as well. So yeah, I think Madison deserves a move like that at some point.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
for now, he's just going to move out of our FPL squads, and we'll get to that pretty soon. But first, we're going to take a look back at last game week 30. I'm going to start with Chemo because I actually have some interesting thoughts about Chemo's future plans. So that's why I want to do him first with the future plans. So we'll do him first with the score as well. And also because he didn't follow my advice from last podcast, I said that he should bring in Grealish in for, I can't remember, for someone, for, I can't remember. But I figured he should bring in Grealish so he could actually get to keep Kane. And yeah, Fernandes to Grealish, and then he could have done Tony to Haaland rather than Kane to Haaland. Obviously, he got a bit unlucky with Tony missing a penalty, but still, I think having Kane rather than Tony is preferable at the moment. So I think he should have done that, and obviously he would have had the Grealish 12 points as well. But he went with Joao Felix to Isak instead, and Isak scored, to be fair to him. So and Felix did not. So not the worst moves from Chemo. He ended up with 52 points. He has a pretty similar team to you. It's just one player different. I don't know if you can notice who in the starting lineup.
The starting lineup, it's Tony.
Yeah, Tony to Kane. That's the difference between your teams. So yeah, like you, he benched McAllister. I think you were kind of lucky there because Brighton should have had like 3 penalties, or at least 2. So McAllister could have had a monster haul as well, and he had, what was it, 1 assist taken off and 1 potential goal taken off as well. So I think he could have had a huge score. Fernandes as well could have had a better score as well. That's who I would have benched. That's what I advised you guys to bench. But anyways, not the worst for Chemo. I don't know if you have any other comments about his team.
I think generally speaking, he got very unlucky with certain things. I mean, Felix could have hauled as well because if you look back at the stats, he's one of the players with the most shots, in the Premier League right now because he's just constantly shooting. He's just unfortunately firing blanks for both Chelsea and my brother's favorite team. So, but in terms of everything else, I mean, Fernandes could have hauled. Rashford, as we'll get to speak a little bit more about your team, could have absolutely gone a hat trick if he had been his usual self.
Yep.
Matoma, like we mentioned, could have. I think personally, you should give the goal.
Yeah.
You should give the goal, considering the fact that he gets pushed in the back and therefore has to adjust himself and therefore accidentally
his shoulder
touches it. Yeah, so I think personally that should have been given. The penalty should also be given. These were 2 clear-cut things that I think you should have given. Personally, maybe the handball, I guess I get, but again, I'm very against. I really hate the Premier League sort of leniency towards people pushing with like double hands. I don't get how that is allowed constantly, just because it's not that forceful of a push. It's clearly impedes them and clearly changes stuff, and I'm not a fan. And it's like you said, it's really lucky that the match sort of went the way it did for Spurs, and also that Kane got to score and all this type of BS. So yeah, I think he was just unlucky. I think 52 is still a decent score for what was, generally speaking, a low-scoring game week.
100%. And moving on to your team, it should also be noted with Chemo, he has all his chips left. That's going to be interesting when we go later into the podcast. But
Crazy.
Looking at your team, just one change in the starting lineup. Like we said, Kane in for Tony. Kane got 9 points compared to Tony's 4. And also you have you benched McAllister as well. You have Raya on the bench, Botman and Henry from the wild card. Chemo didn't do the wild card, so that's the difference between you guys. And as you can see, the final points, you get 5 extra points because Kane is there instead of Tony. So Not really that much to say about it. About the thing, you have a pretty similar team to Chemo. You've had pretty similar teams ever since we started doing the podcast. So yeah, we sort of influence each other. But Chemo should have listened to me last week with the Fernandes Grealish move, because that's how he could have kept Kane. That you actually did. Like, you didn't need to do that move to keep Kane, but you could do Tony to Holland instead, and that worked out for you. So yeah. I guess you've already commented on Chemo's team, so it's pretty much the same for your team, just that you kept Kane. But just on the topic of Kane, because we mentioned this right before the podcast as well. He has, in Gameweek 33 and 34, he plays Man United at home and Liverpool away. But then he has really easy fixtures after that as well. But what do you think about Kane? Do you think you should keep him? Do you think he's someone you should keep for the long run? Or do you think you should need to sell him for better double game week players? Like, for example, Salah. It's hard to fit in Haaland, Salah, and Kane, and Fernandes especially as well on top of that. So what is your thinking on Kane versus Salah? Is sort of like a big talking point as well. So what do you think about Kane going forward?
I think personally with Kane, it's just he's been so reliable. He just gets a goal. He doesn't always and the thing is, that he can explode for a haul. Man United haven't necessarily impressed me in terms of away matches against the bigger teams. So I think for now, he doesn't warrant anything other than a keep. Most of us, almost all of us, are going to free hit, on 32.
Yeah.
He's playing Newcastle away. It's not the best match, and therefore it's another sort of match day just for free that you won't have him anyways. So then it just becomes a question of, do you keep him against United and Pool? But for me personally, I feel like he's worth keeping. Liverpool have been extremely shaky. United are shaky when they don't play at home. So I think it's worth it. I think Kane feels like he wants to finish the season strong. He doesn't really have anything else to play for in terms of tournaments and stuff like that. So he's going to go guns blazing. He's going to try and make sure that people remember that, yes, whilst Haaland is running away with Golden Shoe, that he's clearly the second best in terms of goal scoring. So personally, I think he's good to keep. It's also noted that Son is finally getting more involved, and that's good for Kane because that puts less pressure on Kane to have to create everything by himself, and he can stop doing this bullshit Messi thing that he tries to do. I'm sorry, there's a reason why Messi does what Messi does, and that's take the ball from deep. I don't understand why Harry Kane thinks he can do that. Just focus on being inside the box and score, my friend.
Fair enough. That's why they need Madison, like we said. He can do that work for Kane as well. But yeah, I think Kane is a really interesting player. I'm leaning towards selling him personally because I just really want to have Salah. I think he's amazing. Even if he loses pens for Liverpool, penalties hasn't been a factor for him this season. He's just been missing 2 penalties and gotten minus points from having penalties this season. But I think Salah is someone I really want to get into my team, but it's just a question. Maybe I can get the funds to do Fernandes to Salah, but I also like Fernandes going forward. So now that he's not going to play the deep lying role, hopefully. But anyways, Kane is a really interesting point of discussion, but that we'll get more into later, I guess, in Game 33 and 34. Moving on, we have a recurring segment in this podcast, and that is the Manager of the Week. If you would like to be the Manager of the Week, you just need to join our league. As you can see, the league code right over me there, 6IYV7U. You can join the FPL Scope Mini League, and if you are the Manager of the Week, the manager with the highest score for a week or one in a game week, you'll get to be featured on the podcast. And this week, it is a Nigerian gentleman, I think, by the name of Uparaucha Favor. I hope I pronounced that correctly. It sounded decent, at least in my head. But he's had a really good game week. He did really smart transfers as well. Like, he did sell McAllister, which is sort of like, who knows if that's correct. But he has 2 Brighton midfielders already anyway in Mitoma in March. So he did McAllister to Grealish. That worked out perfectly. Grealish got 12 points. He's like one of the most favored transfer options in this coming game week. Then he also did the obvious move of Tony to Haaland as well. He had plenty of money in the bank to do those 2 transfers because that is some expensive transfers because he's upgraded in both positions there. But really good game for him. He has Watkins. That's the guy you could have rather than Kane. He sort of provides the same sort of thing, like reliable 6, 7, 8, 9 points every week. He got 7 points this week. and yeah, benefited this team as well as March as well, 7 points. I see a lot of people with Mitoma and McAllister, but March was the one getting the points returns this game, and he also had an assist taken away. But I guess it wouldn't have been an assist if it hit McAllister in the chest, because it would have just been a Welbeck assist and McAllister goal. But still, March is always doing really well when it comes to underlying stats. So yeah, this is. It's really fun to see as well, the managers that we get from all over the country. So yeah, what do you think of the league and manager of the week and stuff? It seems like it's going really interestingly. Like, we had people from Malaysia, people from Nigeria, people all across the world. So it's really fun to see. So what do you think about the whole FPL Scope community that we're building now?
Yeah, it's just really fun to see that so many corners of the world are uniting in the fun aspect of the game, which is to try and be the best. And you know what? I don't know if he may have seen our video, but it looks like a manager who took some good advice, because I think someone mentioned that we should be looking at getting Haaland and Grealish. And if only one of the managers and one of the co-creators of this podcast had just listened to said advice, because Grealish looked always like a good choice, and he has. You have been a very big Grealish fan since I can remember, and he is proving to be that 100 mil. I mean, 100 mil is still a lot, and
Yeah.
it's very much an English player thing, and also Aston Villa just capitalizing on the fact that they're selling their captain. And
Anthony was 90 million, but it should also be noted with Anthony, it's his first season. Grealish didn't look that good in his first season, so we should give Anthony
no,
time as well. So
of
yeah.
course, but in general speaking, had Jack Grealish been Greelini from Italy, he would have gone for 50 mil sort of thing. So, it's BPL tax. It's also the fact that he's English and etc. But today in the Champions League, the last couple of weeks, he has proven that he just needed that time to gel and get used to, Pep Guardiola's sort of way of thinking and looking at things in the game. So I think he's growing in confidence. He's looking like the first player on the team sheet, and you can tell just by looking at him as of late, you can tell that this is the Grealish that we know from Aston Villa, the one who's willing to do some tricky stuff, the one who constantly gets fouled. Like, I'm constantly like, oh my God, this guy is the old Grealish, because Grealish used to get fouled all the time and he used to whine about how he feels he wasn't protected and etc. But the fancy flicks and everything that's coming together now, just because he has a bit of confidence, is really cool to see. And I think anyone who has Grealish should stick with him. Of course, you can never know with Pep Roulette, and
Yeah.
He's been lucky that Foden's been injured for a few weeks. But I think Grealish is gonna continue capitalizing. I mean, yes, technically Bernardo Silva was the one who got the goal and assist in the Champions League, and Grealish didn't actually get a fantasy return. But you could just tell by looking at the game, he was so involved in a lot of the attacks and the back heel that led to eventually Haaland crossing the ball to Bernardo Silva. It's just beautiful, and I think anyone who has Grealish should stick with him.
Yeah, I think it's just yet again we can see the lesson of, if one big City player gets injured, you buy the direct opponent or the direct competitor to his place. Like, that always used to work with Jesus and Aguero as well. Like, whenever one of those guys got injured, you brought in the other one, and they always performed. And that's the same thing with Grealish and Foden now. With Foden injured, everyone should have just been like Grealish in, Grealish in, Grealish in. And now he's proven to be a really good asset. So I'm really happy that I had him in last week's weekly wildcard draft as well. And I did advise Kimo to do the transfer as well for Grealish. So maybe this manager heard that advice, like you said. That would be amazing if that was the case. But yeah, I think selling McAllister is kind of iffy. But McAllister as well has been sort of penalty dependent lately. So yeah, we'll see about that. He has 2 bright midfielders, as mentioned. So yeah. Big ups to this guy, and like I said, you can join our league and you can be the manager of the week next week if you're good enough. Potentially could even be one of us two as well. It could be Kevin, maybe. Then we wouldn't feature you twice because we wouldn't have 2, but still we'd just highlight that. But anyways, let's move on to the fixture ticker. And what's really notable here is the top 3 teams: Liverpool, Man City, and Brighton. They do have the double game week in 34, and that obviously contributes to why they are top of this fixture ticker, why they have the easiest fixtures. But it just seems like a no-brainer to target those 3 teams, and especially if you look at Man City and their expected numbers as well. Like, second place in terms of expected goals, right behind Brighton, and then by far the best team in terms of expected goals conceded. Yes, they do concede that stupid, silly one goal every time. That's typical City. They've always done that as well. But I think they're going to be really good defensively, and they've also been using that same backline for pretty much the entire last month or two now, with Ake and Akanji and Diaz as the sort of back three, and then you have Stones in sort of the DM position where he gets forward. He had the assist today in the Champions League, pretty far up, and headed it back to Haaland, who scored. So yeah, I think those three teams are obvious teams that you should target. But other than that, are there any other teams that tickles your fancy? You have Man United that have the double game week as well. They don't have as easy fixtures, but they also make a lot of sense. But with Rashford and Shaw out, are there really any other Man United assets you'd look into, potentially Fernandes? But other than that, is there any other Man United player you'd like to bring in, or is that just that you just hope that Rashford and Shaw are back healthy for 34? And that's it.
I think so. I think Jadon Sancho has been growing a little bit in confidence and stuff like that, but again, it hasn't resulted into crazy goals or assists yet. So we know the potential is there. Anthony is the most selfish player I've seen in a long time, which is crazy. I was there live when he got 4 assists in the same game. I don't understand where that side of Anthony's game has gone. So I think in terms of that, you could definitely look at Anthony as well, because he is still getting a lot of love from Ten Hag. But unfortunately, it is basically Rashford or Shaw. I will say this though, and this is coming from a guy who actually owned and had him score at least once this season. If Tony Martial is back finally, you can easily look into him. I think he's been great. Personally, I knew he was going to score against us because he always scores against Everton. But I think generally speaking, he is someone that they will consider, because it says everything that he outscored Weghorst in literally just 2 seconds. So I know it plays into Ten Hag's thinking. Yes, Martial doesn't do the pressing that Weghorst does, but Martial scores, and that's what you want out of a striker at the end of the day. So I think Martial is actually a really good outlier, and maybe someone that people won't consider simply because of his sort of injury record. But man, we know that Martial can pop up with a goal or two, especially if Rashford's out too.
Yep. 100%. I think that's a really good shout, and yeah, it's just a matter of if he's healthy, and that's always the question with him. But it's the same with Reece James as well. He also looks like a decent option, even though Chelsea, as you can see, they're at the bottom of the list. They don't have the best fixtures. They have Brighton, they have Arsenal, they have Brentford in the next 3 matches, and they blank in Game 32. Should also be noted this fixture ticker does not take into account the Game 32 fixtures, because they are that's a game week where we are likely to do the free hit anyway, so it doesn't really go into our thinking. But if you don't have a free hit in 32, then obviously teams like Arsenal, Wolverhampton, West Ham do much better, because they have really easy fixtures in 32 that would bring them up this table as well. So yeah, if you're not on a free hit, who would you look into if that's the case? Because then, I mean, Arsenal, definitely. You mentioned Martinelli already. Would you even triple up on Arsenal if you didn't have a free hit? Or would you do, I don't know, what is your thinking there? Do you think Arsenal, West Ham, are they interesting? Fulham, they don't look good lately. Any other teams that look good for you?
I think, I think Arsenal is a good shout. I think if you want to go with Billing against West Ham, you could, I guess, but no, that's a bit of a gamble. I would personally say at least one Arsenal player for sure, whether that be Martinelli, Saka, or Odegaard. I would definitely say, I might say Harry Kane, just because of his scoring record against Newcastle. I wouldn't say that Newcastle away is a good game. I just purely on the fact that Harry Kane loves to score against Newcastle. But other than that, there's just so many crap teams that are playing Game Week 32 that I would say stay clear of. Aston Villa, maybe. I think they've been quite interesting, and I think, obviously if you are Ollie Watkins guy, yeah, go for it. I think I mean, Martinez is sort of one of those players that fell off the radar, but he's been quietly really good in all things considered, considering the fact that Unai Emery made it so clear that he didn't want Martinez as part of his plans and stuff like that, and now can count his lucky stars that Martinez is the guy between the. Come on, man, we know the France game, like we know what this guy's about, so it was really stupid reasoning behind all those comments, anyways. But yeah, I think maybe Aston Villa players
Yeah.
there. Tony potentially, but that's only if he doesn't get a yellow card in the
Yeah.
Wolves away game, which could be this like a scrappy game, generally speaking, considering the fact that Wolves stupidly beat Chelsea and now have, the confidence to try and go out and do some more damage. So yeah, I think Tony could be a good shout as well. But yeah, I'd stay clear from James Ward-Prowse. I'd stay clear of. I mean, if Crystal Palace beat Southampton, then maybe I'd say Eze or Elise would be good shouts because both were excellent in the
Yeah.
thrashing of Leeds.
I think Elise is one of the guys you should definitely look into if you don't have the free hit in 32 and you need a player from 31 until 35 that can play every week, then Elise it's definitely a good shout. Crystal Palace have looked so much better with Hodgson and the easier fixtures as well. Should be noted. Saha as well is probably gonna come back pretty soon-ish. So yeah, Crystal Palace. I'm definitely looking into that Crystal Palace at home to Everton match in 32 for the free hit as well. So yeah, Crystal Palace I think is really good. Billing, a bit typical if he scores against West Ham. Even more so if Solanke scores against West Ham. But yeah, he's been really on fire lately as well. So I think that's a good shout. And Liverpool obviously is like the main choice because they have a Gameweek 32 fixture and then they have the best fixtures outside of that as well. so yeah, load up on Liverpool for sure. Have some Arsenal players like I said. Elise is a good shout, and yeah, some of the other guys you mentioned as well, really good. And potentially also a West Ham player if you dare. But personally, I wouldn't go there. Maybe Suma, maybe.
I think Bowen deserves a shout.
Bowen deserves a shout, but he's pretty expensive still. So
yeah,
I think Bowen's gonna be really good next season. But we'll talk more about that next season. So let's move on to the weekly wildcard drafts. I did this video earlier today, but if you're watching this is getting posted the day after we're filming. So this weekly wildcard draft team, I made a video for this on Tuesday. And this is what I came up with for the team this week. I had a couple of people drop out. Rashford because of his injury. Watkins just because he already played his good game now at home against Nottingham Forest. And he only scored one goal towards the end of the match. But he's still a good option. But it's just I prefer to have a better midfield this time. And then there's a lot of other changes as well. So what do you think about the team first and foremost? Are there any players, any like differential shouts you like, or are there anyone that you have questions about in terms of this team?
not necessarily. I mean, obviously, I understand that some players need to get benched, including Robertson, who's a piece of shit who I don't like. But other than that, no, I think I really like the sort of boom or bust sort of options with some of the players, including Konate. We discussed this earlier that he's pretty much either someone who plays 90 minutes and is the best player on the pitch, or he just doesn't come on at all. So
Yep.
I think it's worth taking risks with that. I understand why you have Everson, but at the same time, it's just like he's so bad.
Yeah.
De Gea has a good shout. I think he's one of those consistent United players that will always play. And yeah, I mean, I think Salah not being a part of my team when I've had Salah pretty much all season is starting to piss me off.
Yeah.
Um,
You were
if
one
I
of
had
the
to
you were
go-
one of the ones that had him against Man United with the 21 points. So
Yeah, exactly. So, and I not swapped it to Holland, I would have had him as captain that game day as well. So frustrating. But that being said, yeah, I like the team. I think it's just a question of whether McAllister gets swapped to March. But other than that, all just because of just how dependent on penalties McAllister has been a little bit lately. But other than that, I think this is a more than serviceable team.
yeah. So some of the players that I sort of struggle a bit with some of the later picks in this. Not really Everson and Greenwood there. They're just for money purposes, like just to have more money to spend on the rest of the team. But the 11th pick, Fernandes, and the 13th pick is Stupinian. I've had such high hopes for those guys the last few game weeks, and they still haven't returned that much. But I think it's sort of... I know you've been singing Estepinian's praises as well. So do you think he's worth keeping faith in, or do you think it's someone potentially to sell so you can have 3 bright midfielders, for example?
I think it's worth it. I think Estepinian has been one of the more unlucky players. Like some of the shit that I've seen him do, I'm like, this is prime Hordial, but like, what the hell is going on? He's just he's trying to create chance after chance and assist after assist. It's really, really fun to see, and really, Brighton are having such a good time. They're what Everton has been, in the past with the Coman and Martinez days. So enjoy it while it lasts, and hope you continue building on this. But yeah, Stupinian has been great. I think he's just been really unlucky not to get more returns.
So what about Fernandes? Do you think because he's been really impressive in the deep lying playmaker role. He's sort of been like what prime Jorginho was, and even better than that because he has more work rate, and I think he's just a better player in general. I think Fernandes is amazing. Like we've both been huge fans of Fernandes for some time. You actually introduced me to him when he was linked with West Ham several years ago when he played with Sporting. But do you think Fernandes, now that Casemiro and Eriksen are back, do you think he'll still play in sort of like the more deep playing role, or do you think he'll be more offensive? Especially now, that's sort of my thinking, that especially if Rashford is out, they need Fernandes' attacking prowess and they need someone to create something offensively. But do you think Fernandes will be back to winning ways, or do you think he'll still just be like a deep playing playmaker going forward?
Nah, he has to be going back to winning ways. I think Ten Hag must have been kind of frustrated the fact that what they gained from having him at a CDM sort of position is the fact of how stable he was, but he became so little of an attacking threat that not a lot of chances were created. The biggest example of that was that really, I'm telling you, god awful Brentford game. I've never been so bored looking at a match because I was just like, what? They're not doing anything. Yeah. Of course, the only way they scored is through a Rashford, sort of
rocket in general.
Rocket / Sunday league sort of scrappy, yeah. Just blasted as hard as he can sort of goal. But it says a lot about Fernandes's sort of ability, because in the match after, from a CDM role, I mean, he was crazy against Everton. He could have got 3 assists, could have gone like a brace if he had just taken some shots differently, all this type of stuff. So I think he'll want him back in an attacking position, because that is where Fernandes is at his best.
Yeah. And even if you downgrade Fernandes to someone like Andreas, like I had last week, you still can't afford Kane for Greenwood. So that's sort of like the difference in the team that I made. Like my team has terrible team value, so maybe you can get Kane into the team if you downgrade Fernandes personally,
sure,
whether it's you or someone else. But also the other interesting thing about the weekly wildcard draft is that I think Kimo, our third member of the FPL School podcast, who's back home in Egypt and having fun from there during Ramadan, I think he could really use the wildcard. But before we look at the potential wildcard for him, let's take a look at his current plans and his current team. I try to get a hold of him. He's, like I said, enjoying his time, so I haven't heard back from him about his future plans. But I figure if he's not doing the wildcard, I think, like most people, he's going to look to offload Madison, and I think he sort of regrets the not bringing in Grealish thing from last week. And Grealish at home to Leicester, it just seems like such an easy pick as well. I guess he played now in the Champions League, so maybe he'll be scared that he doesn't play because Mahrez didn't play in the Champions League, so maybe he comes in and Bernardo, I don't know. They could figure it out and play Julian Alvarez as well, but that might be the only thing putting me off Grealish or putting Kimo off Grealish. But if you did not wildcard and you were Kimo, would that be your move, or would you look to bring in someone else? You mentioned Salah, you mentioned Martinelli. He's pretty close to Salah, I guess, because he has 3.1 in the bank because he doesn't have Kane. So do you think you'd try to get Salah somehow? Maybe Rashford to Grealish and Madison to Salah? I don't know if that works for him, actually.
If that works, then I'd suggest that the latter move that you
Now
just.
Rashford and Grealish are sort of the same price. I don't think that works either, to be honest. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about Man City versus Leicester is that Leicester have done some random wins against them and stuff like that, so they're not someone that they should take lightly. But all things considered, it's gonna be a smashing. It's gonna be a wonderful day as an Evertonian because I need another team to do worse than we are. So we need to scrape by. So for us, I need a thrashing. I don't think Grealish is going to get benched either. So I think it's not the most sideways move waiting to free hit for Salah because, yeah, it is Leeds away and stuff like that. But Leeds have shown, even in the game against Crystal Palace, even though they got absolutely smashed, on a different day they could have created more chances and all this type of stuff. So, and Liverpool have not convinced anyone away from home. So it's not the worst idea to bank on City going crazy against Leicester and waiting to bring in Salah. As we said, he might be able to. The best move for him right now could be just doing the Grealish move, free hitting, and then doing the wild card and setting himself up beautifully for triple captain, bench boost, and everything like that. So it's not the worst move in the world to do just Grealish. However, if he wants to set things up already, he could also get rid of Fernandez for Salah, but
Yeah.
that's only depending on whether it actually works or not.
I think that might actually work because I think Madison is like 8.2, Grealish is a million less thereabouts, and then Fernandez to Salah isn't that much. Like it's 2 million or something. I think you might actually be able to do that.
Salah's 12.8.
Yeah,
He
and
is.
I mean it's 3 million more than Fernandez, who's like 9.8, I think. So
Yeah,
yeah,
should
I
be able
think
to
he
do.
actually has the money to do that straight up, just Salah to or Fernandez to Salah if he wants to, but then he'd keep Madison. But he might as well just do the -4 to do Madison to Grealish as well. So yeah, that might actually be a good move for Kimo. So maybe that's a good move. But personally, I think you can get both Grealish and Salah, and potentially even Fernandez. No, don't have Fernandez in this team actually. But so this is my suggestion for Kimo and his wildcard. So if he does the wildcard, he can do 10 transfers in total, which is kind of crazy. That's quite a lot of transfers. And he'd have this team for Gameweek 31. It's pretty decent. He has Robertson. I know Kimo doesn't like Liverpool defense, so I guess he'd like to go with someone else rather than Robertson. Maybe you just keep Chilwell or Reece James. That's just up to him, I guess. Then he brings in Stones as well. I think he's great to have for the Leicester home match. I don't think they're going to concede, considering what Leicester did against Bournemouth. Doesn't look like they're going to score against Man City. And then he has the double up with McAllister, Mitoma, and Grealish at home to Leicester. And Salah. I'd actually really like to hear Kimo's thoughts about Salah because he is the Salah whisperer after all. So he knows what Salah is thinking. He knows what Salah is saying to the Egyptian press and how he's looking. And he also, I think Kimo as well would make a case for Salah just because of his fixtures against Leeds. Historically, it's been fantastic for Salah. So yeah, I think this is a really good team for him. He can have Watkins rather than having Tony as well. He gets that move as well. And he gets to keep Isak and Haaland. And he has some extra options because he has free hit in 32, which is, he'd used to free hit in 32. I haven't set up like a free hit team for him, but he can figure that out himself. Mm-hmm. Then going 33, he could just save his transfer. He has a pretty good team here already. He can even play March against Forest at home or Forest away for Grealish against Arsenal if he wants to bench him, or doesn't really matter. He has triple Brighton midfield as well. And then in Game 34, he can do Watkins to Darwin and have the triple up with Liverpool. And this would be his bench boosts. So he has every single player starting for him is a double game week player. And then on the bench, he has Everson, who's not the best goalkeeper, but he has 0.5 in the bank. So I guess he could go with 4.3. Yeah, it doesn't really have any other options. Everson or potentially Steele as well. Maybe he can do someone other than March, but anyways, he has like a double game week team as starters, and then he also has Isak at home to Southampton, Trippier at home to Southampton, and then Suma as well against Crystal Palace and Man United, or Man City away. I mean away. So I think this is the best option going forward for Kimo. What do you make of it? If now that you've seen both his current team and my wildcard suggestion. You're muted, I think, because
Yeah,
there's
that's
people.
that's by design that I'm muted. But basically, to go into the plans, I think it's a perfectly good suggestion, and I think it's what he should be doing. But again, I've seen him do stuff where it's like, uh, 36, I'm going to do this. 37, I'm going to do this. 38, I'm going to do that. So I'm looking forward to seeing if he's going to be the erratic mad genius or if he can do something more methodical in this. Considering the way the sort of fantasy has been going this year, I think he'll listen to the suggestion or do sort of his own thing, simply because that's sort of how the game's been dictated, that you have to do sort of predictable, boring suggestions and stuff like that. So personally, I think this is a really, really good team. It's just a question of whether one of these players ends up being Rashford by the time of the double game week and all this
Yeah.
type of stuff. But then he'll have the transfers to do something like that because
I think what he could do is if he downgrades Darwin, because I'm not really sure about the list Liverpool strikers as well. Like Firmino has been looking really good lately. He's gonna get a send off before he leaves. Darwin has been benched a couple times lately, and he hasn't been that good all season, to be fair. And Jota as well is still working himself back into fitness. So I'm not 100% sold on the Liverpool striker. So he could actually go with the move that you said earlier, Martial.
Yeah.
And that leaves him more money in the bank, so he can do March to Rashford. And then, because he has too many Man United players now and too few Brighton players, he can get Estupinian here.
Yeah.
So that's another great option. He still has the option to do this as well for like a wildcard and then bench boost. So I think it looks really good for him, and he can obviously tune it to his own demands. He could downgrade Robertson, like I said, as well, if he wants to do that. Mm-hmm. He could go with someone else. He could even go punt on Evan Ferguson as well as a striker for Brighton. He might be good for the double game week as well. Like, you never know. Welbeck has been playing lately, and Welbeck is playing really well as well. But Ferguson is the future for them, so I think that's a decent punt as well. So yeah, something that Kimo should take into consideration at least. I'll be interested to hear his thoughts about this after he's seen this. But yeah, it seems like you are pretty much a big fan of both of those options. Really, it seems like he can do really well regardless. I'm pretty envious of him having all the chips left. He obviously is behind us in the table, but he can catch up quite a lot by the different strategy he took. So it's going to be really interesting to see what Kimo does. Now we go on to your plans, and I spoke a lot now. So Kevin, take it away. What is your thinking in terms of transfers? We already talked about the Maddison move, Grealish and stuff. Saka, you're looking into potentially getting an Arsenal player. What are your thoughts about the team? And I know you had some other -8 potential moves as well that you were discussing before the podcast as well.
I'm not 100% sure I know what I'm doing. Like, I feel like Grealish is the preferred move over Salah currently. So what I might just do is just Maddison to Grealish and then just leave it at that.
Yeah.
I don't think, like, looking back, I don't think Arsenal are as essential as I originally perceived, even though, it'd be fun to have them for the sort of title race and etc. But in terms of, going forward with the matches and sort of planning out for double game weeks and stuff like that, it's much smarter to stick with a City player who we know is going to have double game weeks, who has one of the best schedules. I mean, just West Ham, Leeds, Fulham, Leicester, and even Arsenal at home. People forget, City beat them, albeit a bit luckily, them at the Emirates. So them to play at the Etihad could easily end like a 3-1, 3-0. Like, it could even end 5-0 if depending on which Guardiola City that you get. So I think the priority right now is to maybe get Grealish in, maybe going a -4 to get rid of Chilwell and get Stones. So just double up triple up on City already, and then have that sort of headache gone, and then that will help me get Salah in for game week 33, and then look at maybe even Konate and all this other stuff that I should be looking at towards building. It's just that for me right now, that Maddison is just so bad. The Rashford is we don't know how long he's out for. Groin injuries are sort of those things where it can be a couple weeks, it can be a month or so. So
Yeah.
it all depends. And I feel like Rashford's gotten a bunch of groin injuries in the past that have sidelined him for longer than people expected, and etc. And this was when he wasn't even in the FPL sort of aspect of relevant. Like it's just, oh, they're clearly missing Rashford in terms of just looking at football in a footballing perspective. So, um, yeah. And I also think Fernandez, as much as I love him, hasn't really been the sort of gamble and differential that I was expecting him to be. So, yeah, I think I want to sort of get Salah in. Might do the -8, just bring everyone in, and then
Yeah.
that's that. But then a lot of my enemies, it is a -8. There's a lot to take back. Then, like, I have to basically bank on the fact that Grealish does something, Salah basically does something, and um, Stones gets a clean sheet. If Stones somehow gets 15 points, then that's the only way I can be like, yep, I've done it. I have succeeded in life. But other than that, I think the team looks good. You know, I don't feel great about McAllister being benched because Chelsea have been just so crap lately. So
Yeah.
we'll see. We'll see. But I think, I mean, I'm making the right moves and going up the ranks. I feel like this is the most crucial thing that I can do. Last week it worked out because I did a very patient thing of just one transfer rather than several and all this type of stuff, and could have gone completely south. But yeah, right now I think a sensible move is just Madison for Grealish, of
Yep.
course. Madison in the classic Trossard, like what happened when I swapped out Trossard against the City, could easily happen. Like he could easily just out of nowhere be like, you know what? I plan on scoring. I plan on
Yeah.
shutting everyone up, including the FPL scope. So I'm gonna
I
score a
mean,
hat trick today.
if you bring in Stones, Madison for sure is the one to break the the clean sheet for
Yeah,
him at
100%,
City.
100%.
But
They've been
on the topic of Stones, because he is the City defender I like the most. But how do you feel about Stones compared to Ake, Akanji, and Diaz and Ederson as well? Like, is he the clear-cut favorite for you, or do you think any of the other defenders are better shouts or equally as good potentially? Because Ake and Akanji are both 5.0. They're 0.4 cheaper than Stones. Ederson is the same price, 5.4. Diaz, he's even more secure in the team than Stones because he's less injury prone and stuff. But he is 6.0, so he's even more expensive. And I think he has less of a goal threat as well, or attacking threat compared to Stones. So Ake, I think, has more attacking threat, but he is also more of a rotation risk. Still a no Laporte. It seems like he's just getting frozen out. So it seems like Ake is pretty safe with this team. But who knows? In a pinch, they could use Laporte if they need a rest for someone else. And they always have Kyle Walker as well and Rico Lewis, and they have some other options that they've used. So what do you think about the defenders? Do you think Stones is the clear-cut favorite, or do you think any of the other ones are good as well?
I mean, Diaz is always a good option. I think, like you said, is probably the one who will get the most minutes. Even though it was like a weird period where he wasn't getting picked at all and all this type of stuff, but he's back to it. I mean, he was amazing against. I actually thought the entire defensive line was amazing against Bayern today. But like you said, I think we know from a historical standpoint and etc. that Stones has done a lot of good things for City. He is the one who's sort of attacking. He has that sense to, pass the ball in the right place or shoot when it's time to shoot or header it on and all this type of stuff. So for me personally, I think Stones is still the coolest pick. He's a little bit more premium, like you said, because he's 0.4 more expensive than the other two, but he is also 6 million cheaper than the absolute stalwart, which is Diaz. So
Yep.
I think it's a good compromise. I think it's the good amount of risk that you can just be like, yeah, I'll bring Stones in. Unfortunately, they don't have fullbacks that we could depend on and all this type of stuff. So, yeah, I think Stones is not the worst pick.
Yeah, fair enough. We'll move on to the manager of the week, Oparaucha favor. I tried again the name. So this is his team currently. I did like one just quick move. I edited this right before the podcast, so I just did like the first move that I could think of, and I was just downgrading the goalkeeper just to have more money in the bank, really, because you want to use your transfer. That's also something that should be noted. You want to use your transfer. If you're free hitting in 31, you can't save your transfer and have 2 in Gameweek 33. Once you do the free hit, you'll have just 1 transfer again. So you should just use your transfer if you have it. So I'm going to go get my charger because my computer is sort of running out of battery. So Kevin, what would you do if you were this team? Go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it just sort of depends on how much they want to fix things, because in current state, they only have free hit left, just like me. So it's just a question of whether they want to already set up with Salah, or if they just want to hold out, hope that he doesn't do anything against Leeds, but then essentially just do 1 transfer to sort of save bank and start getting rid of Chelsea. I mean, the thing is, they could potentially do both Arrizabalaga and Chilwell out in 1 game week and get Stones in, for example. And then they'd have Stones and Everson and be future-proofing going forward. But it all depends on how much of a future proof they want to do. I mean, clearly with some of the moves that they've already done, they've taken that into consideration, right? So it's just a question of whether it can wait a week or it can't. But free hit definitely is coming very soon. So it's just a question of whether you want to already bring in Salah or you want to wait that week.
Yeah, I mean, to bring in Salah, he'd have to sell Kane. Like, what would he have to do and to do that? Like,
That's actually true.
I think it's pretty hard to get Salah in for this team already. So, but that's why I think that's why I just quickly did the Arrizabalaga to Everson move just to have more money in the bank. So you could actually upgrade someone to Salah eventually, because I think Salah is going to be a must-have for double game week 34. So it might even be a good captain's option, but I think Haaland is the best option there still. But either way, yeah, I think personally, other than the move that I just quickly wrote up, because I'm not sure about Kepa's starting place as well with Lampard back. I'm not sure about Chelsea as well. They didn't really concede that many chances against Wolverhampton, but they conceded that wonderful goal by Mateus Nunes as well, the volley. But yeah, I think downgrading either Raya or Arrizabalaga now that bench boost is gone, I think that makes sense. But at the same time, like we mentioned, Stones, we mentioned him a lot in this podcast. He could do Chilwell to Stones as well, because Chilwell faces Brighton, and Brighton usually score in pretty much every game. And Chelsea have pretty poor fixtures after that. If you look at the fixture ticker, they are at the very bottom with Brighton, then blank during free hit 32, and then Brentford usually scores a lot of goals as well. Arsenal away, that's a lot of goals. Bournemouth away, I guess they have a better chance, but that's in game week 35. That's pretty far into the future. So I think that's also a potential move, Chilwell to Stones. But yeah, that's what I think they should do. And they always have the free hit left in 32 as well. So I think this team is in pretty good condition. Already have Grealish. They don't need to do that Madison to Grealish transfer that we all are doing. So I think this is a really good team going forward. So yeah. I think that pretty much covers it for this week. And yeah, we'll just wrap it up with all the usual stuff. You can like the video. You can subscribe to the channel. Would be very much appreciated. Trying to build something great here until the end of the season, and then next season we're going to have the big preseason guide as always on thevideoscope.com. We'll talk more about that later as well. We usually do that every season before the season. We have like a preseason guide with like 10,000 words, and Kevin will be reviewing all the new signings. That's going to be really fun. Really looking forward to do some videos on that as well, with all the new signings and just talking about players in general, because I know Kevin has like one of the most extensive knowledge about like all the different players in the world, from FIFA, from FM, from watching them play, anything like that. So it's going to be really fun in the summer. So follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram to make sure to catch all of that. And you can join our mini league, like I said, 6IYV7U. And that's pretty much it from me. And as always, leave the last word to Kevin. Kevin, what do you have to say for yourself in your last appearance in Sweden in a while?
That's true. I take great pleasure in the fact that Haaland, if he scores a hat-trick against Leicester, he is that much closer to decimating Cristiano Ronaldo's Premier League legacy as one of the best goal scorers, blah, 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 blah. It's about to ruin everything, and I'm here for it. I love it, and I can't wait to captain him and see it happen. Thank you, and good night.
See ya. Bye.